I'm currently at the villa of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, but I'm actually after a far older culture from whom the Romans learned pretty much everything. I'm talking, of course, about the Etruscans. Flourishing from around 900 to 27 BC, the Etruscans are routinely overshadowed by their Roman neighbours whose vast empire make the Etruscans seem like minnows. My fascination with this culture began last year when, near the sleepy Tuscan town of Sartiano, I visited one of the most extraordinary places I've ever been to. Walking through a beautiful sunlit meadow with green hills undulating in the distance, you come across a field of ancient tombs carved into the rock. As you descend into one of the tombs, it grows dark and quiet, and brightness and birdsong disappear from view as you pass the boundary into the underworld. What you see there is nothing short of extraordinary. A fanged demon pulled in a chariot led by lions and griffins. A creature which is part fish and part horse. A three-headed hydra dragging its scaly body through the gloom. This is the Tomb of the Infernal Chariot, a remarkable sight which was only discovered in 2003. The strange beauty of this tomb is symbolic of the culture who created it. Let us explore this remarkable culture through 5 different mysteries, with each one revealing a unique facet of Etruscan history. When we are done, I hope we will have redeemed the status of one of the world's most remarkable civilizations. So, here I am in the Eternal City talking not about the Romans, but about their Etruscan forebears. But Rome is a suitable place to be. Why? Well, to answer that, we must first ask the question, who built Rome? Rome reached its height in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Augustus gave us the Pantheon, Vespasian the Colosseum, and Hadrian the Castel St. Angelo. But many of Rome's most iconic sites actually have far older origins. It was the Etruscan kings of Rome, starting with Tarquinius Priscus in around 600 BC, who were credited with building the Circus Maximus, the Cloaca Maxima, ancient sewers, part of which are still being used today, and the Temple of Jupiter. Through building the sewers, the Etruscans drained the swamps which surrounded Rome, sparing Romans from swarms of malarial mosquitoes. Indeed, in doing so, they actually cleared the site for the Roman Forum, which would become the very beating heart of the Roman world. In other words, Rome became a city in the proper classical mode under Etruscan rule. The historian Livy even described how Etruscan builders and architects were enlisted and shipped over to Rome to do this work. But that is not all. Togas, styles of architecture, numeracy, and writing, the Romans adopted all of these from the Etruscans. Even something as quintessentially Roman as the gladiatorial games wasn't Roman at all, but was derived from Etruscan funerary combats. Indeed, when the Gauls invaded Italy in 390 BC and sacked Rome, the Vestal Virgins, guardians of the sacred fire at the heart of Rome, the city's ritual heartbeat, were protected by the Etruscans in the city of Caere. As you can see, the origins of the Romans are deeply intertwined with that of the Etruscans. But this is even stranger when you consider the fact that the Romans saw the Etruscans as a degenerate and villainous people, as someone they defined Roman identity against. Some of this can be chalked up to the narcissism of small differences. And also, Romans were embarrassed that their political enemies were their erstwhile tutors. But it's true that in other ways the Etruscans were rather different to their Latin neighbours. So who were the Etruscans? Where did they come from? One of the most extraordinary things about the Etruscans is their language. The language they spoke is entirely different to all of the languages of their neighbours. While Latin, Greek, and Gaulish all belong to the same Indo-European language family, Etruscan stands entirely apart. Because of the testimony of certain ancient writers, some scholars had taken the Etruscan language as proof of their immigrant origins. Herodotus, for example, believed the Etruscans came from Lydia in what's now Turkey, and their affinity for Eastern art seemed to corroborate this point. Indeed, most of the iconic red and black Greek pottery, which fills museum cabinets today, comes not from Greece, but from Etruria, where the Etruscans were going cuckoo for Hellenic pottery. But now the scholarly consensus on Etruscan origins is a lot clearer. They weren't immigrants at all, but were indigenous to Italy. A 2021 DNA study seems to confirm this, finding that ancient Etruscans shared very similar DNA to their Latin neighbours. The remarkable fact is that, for whatever reason, the Etruscan people continued speaking a language which predated the coming of the Indo-Europeans in around 2000 BC. This means that Etruscan is a direct descendant of languages spoken in Italy during the Stone Age. But was Etruscan culture a Stone Age survival, like a Jurassic insect embalmed in amber? Unfortunately not. Their voracious appetite for Greek pottery and their veneration of Greek gods and heroes show that the Etruscans were plugged into a wide-ranging network of foreign influences. But their Stone Age language does, for me anyway, tinge the Etruscans with some of that mystique of deep time. It makes me ponder if they held on to any older traditions or wisdom, perhaps forgotten by their neighbours. I don't know about you, but I certainly find that idea to be absolutely tantalising. If you enjoy thoughtful explorations of ancient history, then I hope you give this video a like, and do leave a comment if you think there are any civilizations who are even more underrated than the Etruscans. And of course, subscribe to the channel and give the bell button a little tickle while you do so. Thank you. So if you know anything about the Etruscans, you'll probably know the unique role that women played in their society. Let me take you to a tomb discovered in 2013 in the city of Tarquinia called the Tomb of the Hanging Aryballus. What excavators found within would shake up the world of Etruscology. Historically, academics tended to identify the sex of bodies by related grave goods. If a body was buried with a weapon, scholars would maybe identify them as being a man, and if they were buried with a loom, then we'd call them a woman. But the central skeleton in the Tomb of the Hanging Aryballus, buried with a spear gripped tightly to their chest, turned out not to be an Etruscan warlord, but a war dame. Much mystery remains. We cannot say exactly who this woman was. Was she a fierce Dynas, or did she occupy an official role in the local state? Did she lead troops into battle, or were her military accoutrements merely ceremonial? One thing is for certain, her example is merely the tip of the spear when it comes to examples of powerful Etruscan women. Greek and Roman writers wrote in scandalized tones about these women who could sit and lie with their husbands at dinner time and share in conversation like equals. They were even free to exercise and train their bodies alongside the men. They were allowed to speak their minds, accumulate property, and even leave the house unaccompanied. Good lord! But what's more, this image is actually corroborated by archaeology. In frescoes and sarcophagi, we see Etruscan women eating, chatting, and resting with their husbands in a manner which suggests comparable status. Etruscans also made a habit of celebrating the families and ancestors of both their father and their mother within their tombs. In neighbouring cultures, only the father's family really mattered, with a wife's identity being dissolved within that of her husband. So while the bar is very low indeed, it does seem undoubtedly true that Etruscan women had higher status than women in neighbouring cultures. But inevitably, such arguments get people very excited. And we don't quite have the evidence to suggest that Etruria was a feminist paradise. Indeed, this next mystery may suggest that violence towards women may have still been a problem in Etruscan society. When the Tomb of the Whipping was uncovered in the Tarquinia necropolis in the 1960s, it fast became an icon of the sexual revolution. This tomb has numerous depictions of group sex featuring two men and a woman. But shockingly, in these scenes, the men seem to beat the woman with sticks during the act. Now, from a certain perspective, these images provide an antidote to Christian prudishness. They are a celebration of free love or even kink. But from another perspective, they could be a celebration of power and violence, of men getting sexual gratification from harming a woman. And if this is right, it would seem that the Etruscans are little better than their Greek and Roman counterparts, where the heads of households commonly exerted their physical and sexual dominance on women and slaves. Indeed, in a funny way, it kind of illuminates the highs and lows of the 1960s free love movement, the fact that a deregulated sexual marketplace offers arguably more fun and also more danger. So does this discovery support another part of the Etruscan myth, the Etruscan as the randy liberty? Well, maybe not. This myth owes itself first to the traducements of the Etruscans' Greek and Roman rivals, and partly to English novelist D.H. Lawrence, who wrote beautifully about the Etruscans, but who contemporary society shunned as a pervert. In actual fact, sexual scenes form a far smaller proportion of Etruscan art than they do ancient Greek art. But also remember that the tomb of the whipping is a tomb. While it's strange to us, sex may actually be a perfectly logical companion to depict alongside death, like the life-giving force in communion with the life-taking force. These sexual acts may therefore be ritual or symbolic, an affirmation of life in the face of death. Still, I would say it's not wise to hand-wave concerns away. We mustn't assume that just because a scene of erotic ritual whipping is ritual, that it isn't in fact rooted in real violence towards women. But even if the randy Etruscan has his dark side, there's definitely something inviting about this culture's depiction of the nude body. Think of the Canicella Venus, a statue which guarded a graveyard in the city of Orvieto. It is an image of the goddess Ve, a fertility deity. It is a symbol of new life, meaningfully placed in the sepulchre of the departed. But I don't mean that nude statues like this are inviting in the yeah baby yeah sense, but rather because it's an unembarrassed and sensitive depiction of female nudity. Sex is a celebration of our vitality, and its presence in Etruscan tombs provides ample material for modern people to reflect on our own hang-ups and excesses when it comes to this universal part of life. In the 1980s, excavations in Tarquinia revealed a really bizarre and perplexing find. Buried in the foundations of an Etruscan temple, archaeologists discovered the body of a young boy. But tests on this boy's skeleton turned up a twist. This young boy had epilepsy. Immediately, connections were drawn to one of the Etruscans' strangest and yet most enduring myths. Now, interpreting myths is a tricky business. Some myths are clearly fantasy, plain and simple. It seems pretty unlikely, for example, that Heracles, or Urkel, as the Etruscans knew him, actually fought a giant multi-headed serpent. And yet other myths do seem to contain some garbled history. The account of the Trojan War in the Iliad, for example, clearly retains some information about the Bronze Age, reflected in accurate depictions of Bronze Age weapons and armour. At first, the Etruscan Tarquines myth seems to fall squarely in the former camp. The story, recorded by several Roman writers, recounts that long ago, a farmer was tilling his fields in the vicinity of Tarquinia when he happened across a strange crater in the earth. As he peered down, he was shocked to see a child lying there in the dank mud. But this was no ordinary child. He was eerily possessed with the face of an old man. The farmer's outcry prompted a crowd of local people to form, with whom this strange old child began to share his wisdom. This boy was known as Tarquines to the Etruscans, or Tages to the Romans, and his teachings formed the basis of the so-called Etrusca Disciplina. This was a system of soothsaying, providing guidance to practitioners on how to read the entrails of animals, to predict the future, and how to discern the will of the gods. Indeed, the Etruscans were famed for their skill as seers, and consulting Etruscan oracles became central to Roman policy after the Etruscan conquest. It was even an Etruscan sorcerer, Spurina, who warned Julius Caesar to beware the Ides of March. But is it mere coincidence that a region, Tarquinia, famed for this story of a boy prophet, happened to have a young boy buried in its temple foundations? Crucially, when it comes to epilepsy, epileptic seizures can produce strange hallucinations and visions. Is it possible that this little epileptic boy could actually be the historical basis for the Tarquines myth? Or was he rather deposited in the temple because his condition reminded those around him of that story? The Roman writer Seneca said that the difference between the Romans and the Etruscans was that, whereas we believe lightning to be released as a result of the collision of clouds, they believe that the clouds collide so as to release lightning. For as they attribute all to deity, they are led to believe not that things have a meaning insofar as they occur, but rather that they occur because they must have a meaning. In other words, it may be that the people of Tarquinia did not see this child's visions as a symptom of his epilepsy, but rather saw his visions, epilepsy and all, as a mark of divine favour. For our world, where mental and physical differences are often framed as defects, the Etruscans challenge us to question whether the commonest ways of seeing or experiencing the world are in fact the wisest. Indeed, perhaps the alleged Etruscan habit of finding meaning in everything, in the livers of sheep, in forks of lightning, or in the visions of a young boy, perhaps this can point us towards a different paradigm in these seemingly nihilistic times. I hope you can see now why the Etruscans were and remain so fascinating. While there is far more to say and celebrate, I hope they have at least climbed up the civilization scoreboard in your eyes. Their legacy continues to live with us in all sorts of ways. One nifty fact is that our depictions of angels in the West likely derive from Etruscan depictions of their gods and demons like the winged spirit Vanth. But perhaps the most astounding Etruscan survival is an etymological one. The word person derives from the Latin word persona, which refers to the masks that actors wore in plays. This in turn comes from an Etruscan word, persu, which means mask. How interesting that our very word for person has in its origin the notion of false identities. We project different versions of ourselves out into the world, perform different roles, wear different masks. The true person, if such a thing exists at all, is hard to find. But this is even truer of past people, particularly those whose languages, like Etruscan, remain an enigma. Were the Etruscans the true builders of Rome, sidelined by subsequent propaganda? Were they custodians of secret Stone Age values, reflected in their language, gender relations, and sexual attitudes? Were they really a soothsaying folk with a unique way of imbuing the world with meaning? Or are all of these masks a parade of crude simplifications, generalizations, and projections used in vain by storytellers seeking to capture the genius of a long-dead people? I'm reminded again of that tomb near Sartiano, where we began our journey. In the Middle Ages, it was frequented by Christian shepherds, peasants, and tomb robbers. What did they think when they saw the demons of the Etruscan underworld, vibrant and haunting in the candlelight? I think they, like us, and the Greeks, and Romans before them, will have stood bemused at the strangeness and the glory of the inscrutable Etruscan person. Thanks for watching.